In this segment, we consider the answers for questions 6 through 10. Which of the following is a pair of elements present in proteins? The answer to this question is A, carbon and sulfur. Here in this diagram of the amino acid glycine, it is clear that proteins contain carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. But some amino acids contain sulfur, like the amino acid cysteine shown here in this tripeptide. Can you identify the sulfur atom in this tripeptide? What does active transport across the cell membrane require? Considering first the diagram of the fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane, we can see here a transmembrane protein, referred to as an integral or an intrinsic protein, as opposed to peripheral or extrinsic proteins. These transmembrane proteins have a role to play in facilitated diffusion, providing a channel for certain molecules to move along a natural concentration gradient from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. But when these transmembrane proteins become associated with the hydrolysis of adenosine triphosphate, ATP, as ATP becomes ADP and an inorganic phosphate, sufficient energy is released to force molecules against concentration gradients from areas of low concentrations to areas of high concentrations. And this is termed active transport. Active transport across a cell membrane requires both ATP and a protein channel. Which of the following is an inorganic molecule? And we can think of an inorganic molecule as being anything that does not contain large amounts of carbon. Here we can see that all of these molecules contain large amounts of carbon. C5H10O4, the ribose sugar, here the amino acid glycine, and here this saturated carboxylic acid. All of these are organic, but carbon monoxide, A, is an exception, and so is carbon dioxide, the hydrogen carbonates, and the carbonates. For anything else that contains carbon with the exception of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, the carbonates, and the hydrogen carbonates is classified as organic. Select the combination of words that apply to lactose. Lactose is a disaccharide. Disaccharides are carbohydrates. And as question 8 mentions, these disaccharides and carbohydrates are organic, leaving us with the choice of 2 and 3. Answer D. In the particular case of lactose, it is a disaccharide comprised of a glucose unit joined to a galactose unit. Another example of a disaccharide is sucrose, made up of glucose and fructose. And question 10, in DNA, nucleotides are linked together by hydrogen bonds and covalent bonds. Answer A. Let's recall that DNA is a macromolecule built of 2 long chains joined together by hydrogen bonds. 3 hydrogen bonds between the nitrogenous bases cytosine and guanine, and 2 hydrogen bonds between the bases adenine and thymine. But along the backbone of this polypeptide chain, bonds occur between one nucleotide and another nucleotide, with the 5' end of one molecule with its phosphate plugging in to the 3' end of another molecule, giving us the so-called 5' to 3' direction. The other side of the macromolecule runs in the opposite direction, with the 3' at the top and the 5' at the bottom. When DNA is replicated, you should recall that this replication goes in the 5' to 3' direction, with new nucleotides with their phosphates plugging in, as it were, to the growing chain. For if it were the other way, This very easily hydrolyzed phosphate could be removed and the attachment point on the chain would be lost and the ability of the chain to grow would stop. So it is important that as DNA is built up, that new nucleotides plug in to the pre-existing part of the chain by joining their 5' ends with their phosphates into the 3' end of the growing chain, creating a covalent bond. One side of the DNA macromolecule bonds to the other side through the nitrogenous bases and their hydrogen bonding.